All right. Good morning, everyone. All right. So I said I'd go live this morning, and today's focus is to do some drum editing in Logic Pro. So one of these days I will get back to streaming and actually playing some music, but I have got a lot of editing work to get done, so I figured I would just go live with some new setups I have in the office studio and share some of this work with you. So I hope everyone's doing all right. I got some coffee today. Get started. Got my new dad mug I got for Christmas this year. Love this thing. Wait, can you see it? Hold on, is it? There it is. Hold on, put on the camera here a little bit. Yeah, there's my dad mug. Very nice. So what we're doing today is working on this song over here. Let's make sure we get some audio on the screen here. So hold on, I'll come in full screen here. Hello, hey everybody. Oh, I'm tired. I gotta wake up. Ooh. So we are going to be working on a song for the band Octavate that I play in. I generally sing in Octavate, and I only do a little bit of the songwriting. It's mostly Josh who does the songwriting. But there's a song called Wearing Thin that Josh mostly wrote. I did a little bit of writing on it. And a few weeks back, I was editing the vocal recording, and I decided on this song that I would take a pass at doing the drum recording instead of shipping it off to our drummer who's been doing some of the recordings for us. So I recorded the drums, and now I'm doing some edits in it. Let me turn off. Hold on, let me clean up my screen here so you can see. So you can hear it a little bit. Let's make sure the audio comes through. I'll take it back to the beginning. The metronome is on intentionally. And you should be hearing the audio coming through. That should sound all right. Vocals in it. I made sure that did want vocals involved in this song. Should be hearing this, so if you're going to screen, you're listening along. Just give me a shout in the comments whether you hear or do not hear the audio. Turn off the music so you can just hear the drum track. All right. Bring the music back in. Track of the song, so my color codings that I usually have in place aren't here. So we make this a little bit more visual for us. Make it a little easier for us to see what's what. Hi-hats. My overhead microphones, the whole drum set, my floor tom here, for a sec. So if you are following along here, I have, let me see if I can fit everything I need to on the screen for us to see. Okay, so I have, this is actually a smaller recording of microphones than I usually do. I went to a relatively simple setup. I hope in the end I don't regret what I did, but just so you're aware, I have a microphone on the bass drum. I have a microphone on the snare drum on top of the snare drum. Let me put these things in order a little bit here. Okay, so I have a microphone inside the hole of the bass drum. I have a microphone pointing at the top of the snare drum. I have a microphone underneath the snare drum pointing up at it. So if the microphone on the top is hearing my stick hit the snare drum, the microphone underneath is hearing the actual snare wires buzzing. Then I have two floor tom toms. So if you picture a drum set, usually the drummer has tom toms up in front of them, known as rack mounted toms, and then a couple on the floor. Actually, in this recording, I had no rack mounted toms. I just had two of them on the floor, a 16-inch tom tom and an 18-inch tom tom. So I've got the 16-inch floor tom, the 18-inch floor tom. I have a microphone above the hi-hats pointed at the hi-hat cymbals, capturing those, and then two microphones above the whole drum set to measure it out, equidistant, trying to pick up everything overhead, specifically trying to pick up the crash and the ride cymbals. So that's the setup I have. Now, as I said, hopefully I won't regret it. Other approaches I could have taken is to have another cymbal right by the ride cymbal to really pick up the ride during the different chorus parts, and then also to have a microphone in the room to pick up distant room noise for ambient sounds. I just chose not to put those on this time around. Okay, so I have all of these different tracks. Oh, up in the top here is just a copy of Josh's early recording with the music. There's actually his drum machine drums mixed into this. His guitars, his bass guitars are mixed in. I don't have any of the vocals in here because I just didn't need it. So this is not the official track. This is me just pulling the drums over here. And what I'm doing is I'm going through listening to the drums, which are each all on their own track here. I have grouped the drums together. I won't go into too much detail here, but I've put the drums into a group known as drums. So all of the drum tracks and only the drum tracks are in this group called drums. And I have then taken that group, show it here, and I've turned on in that group editing and quantize. And the work we're doing today is quantizing. So quantize locked is the important piece here. First, the locking of the group. Make sure that if I edit any one drum track, all of the drum tracks get edited at the same time. So say, for example, I hit the snare drum at the wrong spot, or I hit it where I shouldn't have it all, and I want to cut something. If I cut out the snare drum, all the drum tracks will cut out. Or if I hit the snare drum at the wrong time, which, believe it or not, as a drummer, it happens sometimes, I could actually move that snare drum hit over a little bit, and then every drum track that's locked in this group moves over with it. That's what locking does. The word quantize under the grouping here, that is what helps make sure that the drums stay in phase. So if I move the snare drum, the microphones from the overheads are also picking up that snare drum. And if I move them separately, you'll start to hear strange noises and artifacts as the microphones are working separately instead of together. So quantizing makes sure that everything stays aligned. And the other piece of quantizing is if you do move a drum sound, like for example, if I move this snare drum, I'll do it right now. if I were to drag it into a different spot, because maybe I hit it in the wrong area, not only will it move all the tracks in a line so everything stays in phase, but it'll also create transients. So in fact, it'll take the wavelength of the previous and the following note, and it will stretch those out. So to the listener, it sounds as if it was intentional, and if it was recorded that way. It doesn't always work perfect, but let me take a couple measures here, and I just moved that snare drum, so we're probably going to hear a snare drum in the wrong spot right now. It's going to loop. These two measures will loop, but let's listen to that moved snare drum. See if we can hear it together. There. So let me undo that snare drum move. You'll see it on the screen here. Okay, the snare drum moved back to where it's supposed to go. Let me play it again. So we can talk about this. So as that's looping, you'll see all these lines here. These are areas that I have already worked on. So I'm about halfway through this song now of doing this quantizing, and I figured you could join me on the ride today as we quantize a little bit more. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move us to, right now I'm on measures, measure 69 to measure 71. I'm going to move us over to measure 72. So we'll go 70 to 72, turn the volume back up, and see how we sound. So I want to get the music out of here so I can just hear the drums. Let's just listen to the drums. So there's a bunch of things I'm listening for. I'm listening for the obvious sounds that any ear will pick up where, hey, does it sound like the drums are dragging a little bit? Or, hey, does it sound like the drums are speeding up a little bit? I'm listening for those obvious imperfections. I'm not trying to make the drums sound perfect, but the drums are setting the beat of the song. And they're setting that tempo of what you want to nod to. And so if you notice, I have a metronome playing in the background. Let me turn the metronome off for a second. So now you're like, oh, what was that click from? That was the metronome. So I have the metronome on because that keeps me honest of, hey, is there a drum beat that is off time? So I could just edit all the drums to the metronome, which is something I could totally do, but the fact that the music has already been recorded, I have to keep that in mind. We're not doing drum recording first and then everything else after. The way this song was put together is Josh put together all of the music, and he played it with a metronome at 90 beats per minute, 90 BPM. The tempo is 90. And hold on, I should have that on the screen here so you can see it. So here's the tempo is 90. So that's how the metronome's going. So Josh recorded all the guitars and the bass in his drum machine, and then handed it to me and said, hey, do you want to add drums to it, or should we hire our other drummer? So it is not as if the drums are setting the tone for the song. The tempo, the beat of the song, the feel of the song was already created by Josh's music. So I don't have the ability to go and add much of a feel to it. I really need to follow along his recording. That's just what we're doing here. Other songs I have done before, if I think about the song Pain of Reality, I actually started with the drum beat and I recorded the drums first, and there's a little bit of drag in a couple areas and a little bit of speed up in a couple areas, and I didn't quantize it. I actually left it very natural, And then I required the guitars and the singing and the keyboard to all follow along with the tempo the drums made. So even if the drums are not a perfect tempo, everyone else needs to follow along with that. So for today's case, we are not setting the tempo with the drums. The tempo has already been set, but we need to at least make the drums fit and feel like they are playing along with it. So crank this up a little bit. This section sounds good. So let's move ahead. You see the next few measures are already quantized, and you can tell by all these markers. If you have not used Logic Pro before, which I would not expect that you have, but if you've never done this, actually, if you've used Logic Pro, you still may not have ever done any drum editing before. But when you tell Logic Pro that you want to quantize drums and you set it up the way I showed a few minutes ago, it will automatically put markers across the whole song. One of the things I learned recently is my preference to manually quantize things. When I let the software automatically quantize, I have found that it becomes more challenging. So I have auto quantized this song early on, and let me fix my camera here so we can see each other better. So I auto quantized early on, and it actually caused problems. It actually moved beats to the wrong spot from where I played them. So I turned on the quantize feature. I turned off the auto quantize feature. So everything I'm doing here is manual. It'll give me some suggestions of where things should move, and you'll see that moving ahead as we go forward. For example, if I scroll us ahead a little bit, you'll see, oh, this whole area, that is just the, there's no bars, no solid white bars going through it. There's nothing that's been quantized here. And we'll listen through it in a second because we'll get to it. And I think I already went through this last night where there's a whole section where nothing needed to be quantized. So I just left it as is. But let's go back to the part here that I've got marked in this little yellow banner here and see how this sounds. There is a spot here that's bothering me a little bit. I'm probably going to leave it. I don't know if you heard it. It's around the end of the measure. So right as we come into measure 72, I splash on the hi-hat. I hit the hi-hat while I open it and put it and close it with my foot. And I don't love how it came out. It is a little bit off time. The beat stays on time, but the hi-hat is definitely a little bit off. So I've lined up with the beginning of measure 72 here, and down here are my hi-hats. And I can see the hi-hat starts just a little bit before the beat, and then there's a second hi-hat a little bit after the beat. So let's give this a listen. See if we can hear it when we get into measure 72. So beginning of measure 72, it's either this one here or this one here. The thing is, though, the hi-hat and the bass drum are lined up here. So if I move one, both move. And I may just keep it as is because I think this is about as good as I'm going to get it. So I'm going to leave it. It's not perfect, but that's an example of leaving the imperfections keeps it human. It didn't ruin the tempo of the song at all. I think Josh will be okay with it, but we'll find out once I send it over to him. Let's move forward. So we are now at measure 72 to 74. If you notice, I'm just going 2 measures at a time, but I'm just skipping one measure forward. So we're at measure 72 to 74. I notice that in most of measure 73, there has been no quantizing. And again, in Logic Pro, the feature's called Flex Time. All right, let's listen. Well, good on me, good on the drummer for playing this whole pattern near perfection and not needing any edits. Every once in a while, I surprise myself and I play things spot on. Let me give us a little bit more space here so we can see. So that's cool. Let's move us forward. So now we are on measures 73 to 75. Sounds good to me. All right, so we'll move forward. Oh, just a note. I'll share this. So the song I'm working on today is for our band Octavate. You can find us at octavate.band and all over the social media under the name Octavate Band. We just released a new song this week called Better Never Than Late. We have 3 singles out. So what we're working on now will be the 4th single. Our plan is to get it out in January. We'll see if we get it done then. I was supposed to be done with all of these edits by the end of November, and here we are at the end of December, still working on it. So, but if you go into your favorite music player, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Deezer, Tidal, whatever, and you search up Octavate, take a listen to Better Never Than Late. Just came out this week. If I was to say what it sounds like, I think it sounds like a Tool song. I think very much has a feel of Tool. Maybe you'll think something else. Okay, so we are now at measures 74 through 76. Sounds fine. Moving on. The edits you're looking at here are edits I made last night, right before I called it a night. I got up to right where we're at. So we are coming into new territory now. So thanks for hanging out and joining me as I edit some drums in Logic Pro using flex time and quantizing. All right, that was good. Thanks for joining me in the new studio. As I've had a little bit of extra time this month, I have done a few things in here. So let me talk about it a little bit. First off, moved the desk around. The desk used to be on that wall. I moved it to this wall. I finished and painted the wall behind me. I still have some things to do. Behind me, I'm going to hang up my guitars on the wall. I'm going to hang up a few more of my records. I always love to have some vinyl hanging on the wall. So those are still things to do. What you can't see, which is in front of me here, is I now have some studio lighting. I have these bright white lights on me, which is just helping light me up a little bit better. I don't know if I have the lighting just right, but I've got it started. So I've got some studio lighting. I actually got that as a Christmas gift. It's very nice. And I also have 4 cameras now set up around me. I don't think as I sit here and talk to you about editing music in Logic Pro that having multiple cameras is very exciting. But as I get more into, or as I get back into performing live, singing, playing the guitar, I thought it'd be nice to have multiple camera angles. So I have a camera right over here. I'm trying to point so you can see on the camera. It's actually an old Samsung Galaxy S8 phone that is plugged into my computer and connected to my streaming software. I have the camera right in front of us here. It's a Logitech webcam. I have a camera right over here, which is just my MacBook Pro camera that's just attached to my laptop. And then above it, I have another camera, which is my iPhone 11 Pro, which has a piece of OBS software, which plugs into my laptop. So I actually have 4 cameras. And as I get back into performing, I'll have the cameras auto rotate on OBS and just make a little bit more of a visual feel for when I stream live. Um, just thought it'd be nice. The reason I'm not using it today is the laptop that I'm running on right now, which is a 2014 MacBook Pro. When I run Logic Pro and OBS Studio in that, everything starts to lag. So I have in the past set up a 2 computer system. My Mac system has been the system that I do the work on, and then I have a Windows machine next to it, which has been my streaming machine. I'm trying to get back to a single computer for all of the streams. It makes it much easier for screen sharing, but I still have some work to do. Anyways, I want to get back to using OBS on this same computer that I'm on right now, but it gets too laggy. So the way I'm streaming today is I'm using web-based software StreamYard, and it's only a single camera, but it's got a great interface. Makes it really easy to switch screens, and makes it really easy, and it's very visually pleasing, right? I can go full screen me, hello there. I can bring my Logic Pro, small, large, full. I can also invite friends in as well, so it's really nice. Okay, so let us get back to the editing here. So we're moving on to new territory. And this is new. You will actually get to hear some imperfections with me in real time. Let's take a listen. So we are now at measures 76 through 78. So 2 measures at a time. All of measure 77 has not been heard before. So let's get at it. Bass drum sounds okay there. Hi-hat's off a little bit, but not, I don't know, it's not bothering me. Bass drum's good there. Snare drum's good there. Sometimes I realize, hey, not too bad drum in there, Sean. Snare drum looks good there. Bass drum's there, good. Snare's good there. Bass drum is good. Bass drum is good. Snare is good. See how I'm primarily following things? Actually, the snare drum is off right here on what looks like the 4th beat of measure 77. So let's listen. It's just off a little bit. I could leave it. I honestly could. But if I zoom in on it a little bit, I even have a little marker here that's saying, hey, you might be off a little bit here. It's detecting where I hit the snare, and it's putting a dotted line right here. It does it for every detected note or beat. And you'll see most of them are pretty spot on. And this one is really, really close. It's discernible. I hear it. You may hear it as well. So just for fun, I'm going to move it. So all I'm going to do is, there's a couple different ways I can move. I can move things on the top half of the note here, or the bottom half of the note. Basically, the top half will drag everything that's nearby the note, left or right, depending on which way I drag it. It's a little bit risky going that way. The bottom way will drag just this note and then create transients at the beginning and the end. Again, it makes things a little bit more manual for other notes beyond this, but it really does create a nice smooth feel. So I'm going to do this model here first just to see how it works. And so all I did is just click it and drag it, and it snapping right to the 77.4 note. And let's listen, see how it sounds. Pay close attention as we get towards the end of measure 77. What do you think? As far as I'm concerned, it's a keeper. So was there anything else in this measure that I want to change? I don't think so. Oh, this hi-hat got a little bit off. In fact, towards the end of this measure, the hi-hats kept getting off. It's off here, it's off here, a little better here, and then we'll deal with measure 78 when we want to. Let's listen to 77 again. Pay close attention to the hi-hats. Let's listen to this. As I listen closely, I hear it. Do I care enough to move it? That is the question. Let's try this. Just move this one here. Okay, right after that snare drum hit. Let's see how this sounds. Okay, that sounds interesting. Hey, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're editing some drums today for an upcoming Octavate song called Wearing Thin. And we're in Logic Pro using Flex Time. And I'm moving around some minor changes to the drum tones just to line things up with the music that was pre-recorded. All right, so we are on the third hi-hat beat in measure 77. I just moved this over a little bit. Let's see how this sounds. All right, that was interesting. And the last one I'll leave there. So let's listen to it one more time. I moved a snare drum hit and 2 hi-hat hits. Let's listen again. One of the reasons I love to do this looping, especially since this whole song is recorded really tight to a metronome, as things loop around at the end of measure 77 and we're not continuing the song on, but we're coming back to measure 74. If the loop sounds seamless, almost as if like these parts were supposed to play together like this, I know that I have the drums very, very tight. So it's a good test. That's why I like to loop it. Kind of gets this like, hey, is my head nodding without missing a beat? And I know that I feel like we've done this really well. And I will say, I think we have done this very well. All right, we are moving on. So we're going all the way over to measure 79. So now we're going to take the last measure we listened to, 77, which is the first one we edited together. And now we're going to bring in measure 78 as well. So 77 and 78, let's give it a listen. So in Josh's recording where he had a drum machine in there, it sounds like the drum machine is playing some tom-tom beats at the end. That's why I shut his music off, because I was confused. Was it my drum or his drums? I should ask him for a copy without his drum track on it so I don't hear it in the background, because it was definitely confusing me. I think it was towards the end of measure 78. Probably like right here. I think he's got some tom-toms playing. Let's listen to it again. Not that it matters for our editing, but just curious, because he may say, I really like that tom-tom beat. Can you get that back in there, Sean, and then I'll have to go back and figure that out. So when I played, I did not add any tom-toms there. I just did not have any fills. He may like them, and he may ask me to put them back in, and then I'm going to have to either edit things in or re-record the song. So let's go through 78. That first bass drum looked good. This hi-hat is, this is a snare drum. It's off a tiny bit, but I might be okay with it there. And the bass drum looks great. Next bass drum hit is off a small amount, but again, I'm okay with it there. I'll zoom in so we can see it a little bit better so you can get the best view possible. Next bass drum, beat 72, looks good. Hi-hat looks good. Oh, this snare is a little bit early. So that's something to keep in mind. This bass drum is a little bit early. This snare drum is quite a bit early. This bass drum is a little bit early, is quite a bit early. Bass drum is a little bit early here too. Snare drum early. Hi-hat early. Hi-hat early. So hi-hat early here as well. So this whole second half of measure 78 is a bit of a mess. So we start off good. Somehow I start to rush in my recording here. Not rush in a good way. Let's listen to measure 77 and 78 one more time so we can see if we can hear the speed up. Really can't hear it much. It might even be something which we could leave. But since we're here, why wouldn't we tighten things up a little bit? Well, there's reasons why. Sometimes you just want to leave the feel the way it is. Sometimes that's really important, just the feel of the song and the human touch, the human feel of it. But I'm going to move this snare and this bass drum just to see how's this sound. So beat 78, measure 78, beat 2 and 3. Sometimes things are so subtle that you may not even hear it. But sometimes you may, if you've ever listened to a song where you say, it feels like, I don't know, something feels like it just went off. And it is very possible that human drummer was just a little bit off. And it could be another player in the band, but it is most common that the drummer is setting the tempo. And drummers are human. And of course, I'm now making myself unhuman as I just moved from beats 2, 3 over to beat 4 of this measure. I just manually quantized everything. Let's listen and see how things sound closer to perfection. I'm going to pause there. You'll hear is that as the measure wraps up and it starts to loop, something sounds off. And of course, as I see the bass drum for the measure we haven't got to yet, measure 79, it's coming in very early. So I'm going to move that out. And again, I hear the snare drum, which appears to be very early as well. Things start to get a little messy at the end of this measure here. Let's move things around for the end of measure 78. See if we can tighten this up a little bit. So you may or may not have heard that. By moving things around, we just created an artifact in the snare drum. I'm doing a little bit of a roll on the snare drum at the end of measure 78. And as I dragged the snare drum around, it definitely created a sound artifact. I heard it immediately. See if you hear it. I hear it because I actually know kind of my snare drum playing. Let me undo some of these marks. I'm going to do a Command Z on my Mac, and I'm gonna remove some changes here, specifically looking to get back to the snare drum change that I made. Okay, there's one of the snare drum changes. Let's play it now. See if we can or cannot hear that artifact. Let's do it one more time around. The artifact is gone. So moving the snare drum caused some issues with the sound. I'm thinking of leaving this roll a little bit early, but what about this hi-hat? Do I want to move this hi-hat? Let me move this hi-hat so we can line things up perfectly and then see how that sounds. As I'm listening to the loop around and around and around, it sounds seamless as I close my eyes and listen to it. I can't tell where one begins and one ends. That means I have quantized this thing to death. In a good way. In a good way. I've definitely taken some of the human element out of it. But I have made sure that these drums are lining up well with the guitars and the bass and the other parts of the recording. So let's move forward a measure. We're now getting up to measure 80. So we have 78 and 79. We'll listen together. 79 has not been touched at all. Let's see what we got. Let's turn off Josh's track. All right, did you hear some things on that? Did you hear any artifacts on that you thought were interesting? I did. I heard something at the very end, which definitely sounded like I hit a snare drum not perfectly on center. Then maybe I actually hit the rim of the drum. I love when imperfections happen like this. But I also could tell as the measures looped, they didn't loop seamlessly. So there is definitely maybe some speed up or slowing down going on in measure 79. So let's flip through it, see if we can find some problems here. So snare is a little early to start. We know that because coming out of the last measure, everything was rushed. The bass drum is rushed. Bass drum is rushed. Snare drum is rushed. Hi-hat a little rushed. Hi-hat rushed. Hi-hat rushed. Oh, snare drum rushed, sorry. Bass drum rushed. Snare drum ahead. Bass drum is ahead. Bass drum is ahead. Snare drum ahead. Literally everything in this measure is rushed. The entire measure is rushed. So instead of me doing the manual move, which I've done with all the edits that we've looked at so far, I am going to move things using the top bar here. So this will adjust this whole measure. And since I'm going to move it left to right, I'm going to line it up with this marker here. That should move everything to the right over a little bit, which should probably help with some of my edits of this measure. So we already can tell measure 79 is a little bit of a mess. We heard something as we were listening through. Before I move it, let's listen one more time to measure 78 and 79 so you can hear what we just looked at. You may hear just a little bit where the drums may sound a little bit faster. You may not even notice it. It's so close, but let's listen one more time. All right, here it is. Let me have the music back in. So I definitely heard something with the music in. With the music out, it wasn't that easy to hear. But again, since all the music of this song was created on a metronome on a click track, I really need to be tight, and I can't be loose or off. I have to really be tight based on the way that Josh recorded this. So I'm going to move this snare drum over. I'm going to use this feature here, this flex time feature on the top half of the note, not the one on the bottom half, but the top half of the note. I'm just going to move it over a smidge so it lines up with the actual beat. You'll notice everything to the right moved over a little bit, and that may have actually didn't adjust everything perfectly, but it moved everything over a little bit, and it might help with the rest of this measure here. Still get some other areas to look at. So now let's listen to it with this one snare drum moved. Music off to begin, and then we'll turn the music on. So when you see the numbers flash up here, it's 79 2, the second beat of measure 79 we just edited. Wait, was it 79 2? Sorry. It is not 79 2. It's 79 1. 79 2 is down here, which I think that was the one where I did the rim click. So we just moved it here. All right, let's play it with the music on now. That just smoothed out the whole measure so much more than before by just moving that one note and having everything push over to the right. Listen to the loop as measure 79 ends and it loops back to measure 77. If things sound smooth enough there, we can feel confident that we did a good enough job here. Maybe we can leave the rest of the imperfections. The tough thing is, as I spend so much time doing these edits, I almost want to fix every imperfection. But I'll tell you, I think that sounded good enough. Sounded good enough for now. I'm going to leave it for now. I may come back later, but I'm going to say measure 79. You're good enough for now. Let's go over to measure 81. So now we got measures 79 and 80 we're going to listen to. This will be our first time listening to measure 80. Let's listen to measure 79 and 80. This note right here, it's a little early. If you listen to it, I definitely am hitting the rim of the snare drum, and again, it's an imperfection that I love the sound of. I love to leave it. I love to find these in other people's songs. There's an old The Cars song, old 1980s band from Boston, where there are a couple songs where I actually can hear where snare drum was hitting the wrong spot, or he hit the rim of the snare drum, and I love that they left it in the recording. This is one right here. I'd love to leave this imperfection in. Maybe I'll get the okay too, but I will leave it for now. You'll hear the snare drum's not right in the center. It's on the rim a little bit. I like to leave those in. Did you hear it? Okay, let's get back to edits. So measure 79, bass drum, snare drum. We went through all of 79 before, right? Let's not touch 79 anymore. Let's look at 80. Starts pretty strong. Things are lined up pretty well. This is off to quite a good start. Snares a smidge early, nothing that I think you need to worry about. Bass drum's a little bit early there. Back on here. Pretty close to great here. I noticed the hi-hat is a little bit behind the bass drum here. Not much I'm going to do about that because I don't want to mess with the bass drum, which is really the marker that matters most to me. Snare drum is a tiny bit behind on measure 80 beat 4. Hi-hat, pretty solid. I think measure 80 is quite good. I might just leave it as is. Let's listen to it one more time and see if we like how it loops. I noticed sounds like a dragging bass drum somewhere. And maybe I missed before. Let me listen to it one more time. Something about this bass drum bothers me. It doesn't sound like it's lined up properly. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it and put the music back on because it's lined up here with the beat. It just doesn't sound right in my ears. I bet it'll be fine with the music in the mix. All right, we're going to call measure 80 done. And for those just joining, hello. How's everyone doing this morning? We are editing drums in Logic Pro today, going through and finding the smallest imperfections and making modifications so the drums are lining up nicely with the guitars and the other instruments in the recording. The instruments were recorded before the drums, or drums were recorded after the fact. So unlike other recordings where drums are often recorded first and the rest of the band follows along with the tempo and the feel of the drummer, and this song here, the drums were recorded after the fact, and so the drummer needs to really follow along with a metronome and the feel that was created by the guitar players. And in this case, I played the drums, so I'm actually editing my own drum work here. This is for an upcoming song for Octavate that Josh and I have been working on for quite some time. Started working on the song in around April. A couple weeks ago when I was streaming, we were editing the vocals for this song. And today we're editing the drums for it. Hopefully we'll be done with the drum edits today to send over to Josh for his review and his input, and then we'll see how things are going. So we are currently at measure 82. By the way, if anyone's wondering, when does the song end? How many measures are there in this song? Hold on, let's scroll out a little bit so we can see. Ooh, getting a little laggy here. Come on. 113 measures. So we still got a ways to go. All right, let me get myself back to where we're working. Measure 82. Let's zoom back in on the screen so we can see it. Good morning, everyone. If you have any questions, any comments, you can go right in the chat. Leave me a message. Let me know how the sound is coming out. I didn't really do much of an audio check. Hopefully you can hear my voice. Hopefully it doesn't have any artifacts or sound. Hey, what's up, Josh? And I'm going to go back into the edits here. So we're hanging out on measures 80 and 82. Let me zoom back into where we had it. And let's listen. So we've already gone through measure 80. We liked it. We're keeping it as is, no changes. We're going to go see how measure 81 sounds with and without the music. Let's go. So I hear pieces of garbage in this that I'm going to edit here. Just tiny, tiny pieces. Let's listen to it a couple more times around. All right. Turn the music off. There's a couple pieces in here that are going to bother me. So let's go back to the top of the measure. We're going to start at the beginning of 80 and let's just poke around through this here. Bass drum, solid. Snare drum, it's off a smidge, but it might be fine to keep. Next bass drum, next two bass drums are spot on. It's good. This snare drum's off a bit, so there's a little bit of a drag there. I'll probably move that. Hi-hat off a tiny bit, but that might be salvageable. This hi-hat, not so good. So we're going to be moving that. This snare drum, a little bit off. Bass drum, a little bit off. So I'm starting to drag a little bit towards the latter part of this measure. That one hits good. Little early, that one's a little late, here. So I'm starting to see the back half of this measure. Things are starting to drag a little bit. And that's what I could hear in my ears. So let's get at it. Measure 81. Unlike measure 80, which we were good with, measure 81 has got some things that I want to touch up. So I'm going to leave that hi-hat there, even though it's off a tiny bit. It lines up with these bass drum kicks, comes back. This snare drum is off, probably more than I would like it to be. So let's see if, yeah, I have a marker here. I'm going to move the whole, I'm going to use the upper flex time bar to move this to the left. I got to be careful because using the upper part of the note when I do a move like this will move everything else that's in line with it. And hold on, let me go back. That move pulled things that I did not want pulled. So I'm going to do it manually. I'm going to pull just a single note with the transients, and now that snare drum has been moved. Nothing else has. Let's listen to the two measures, focusing on beat 2 of measure 81. Let's go. Yep, keeping it. Okay, so the hi-hat comes off a little bit. I'm a little less concerned about the hi-hats at the moment, but I'll come back and check those. I am concerned about this snare drum being way over here. So let's fix you, and let's figure that this bass drum is going to have the same problem. Now, as I tried earlier, I was going to pull the whole measure over a little bit, but I saw that it messed some things up in the measure before. So let's give this a listen. I just moved a snare drum and a bass drum over just a little bit. Okay. So there's something that I hear in my ears that's off towards the end of this measure, which makes sense because everything is off towards the end of this measure. So let's just tighten this up a little bit. Bring this bass drum over. Bring this bass drum over. Bring this snare over. And let's listen. So that's measure 81, beats 3 and 4. That loop is sounding good. As measure 81 loops back at the end to measure 80. When it loops like that, it sounds like the loop is actually part of the song. You know you're doing good. This is when I think about how do I turn this into a hip-hop song and just bring samples of these songs in, which I'm excited to do that down the road, but that is not the focus today. I think we're good on this measure. I'm keeping this as is. This bass drum bothers me a little bit when it's soloed, but when it's in the mix, I think it's okay. I don't know, maybe Josh and I will come back and tinker with this one, but I don't want to mess with the rest of the placement on this. So I'm leaving it as is for now, but we may come back. All right, let's move ahead. We're going to call measure 81 done. We are moving on to measure 82. Sorry, zoomed out one view too far. There we go. Oops, I keep doing it. It's funny. My system's getting a little bit laggy. I've got most things closed. All right. Hold on, let me zoom in so we can see the screen a little better. All right, cool. So now we've got measures 81 and 82 all the way over to 83. So we've already chopped up 81. Let's see if 82 follows the same pattern that we need to work on. Let's go. Do you hear that? Do you hear the drums and the metronome are a little bit off? Sounds like something went wrong in measure 82. Let's see if we can see it. The bass drums, the snare drum's off here. Bass drum's off. Bass drum's off. Bass drum's off. Measure 82. I don't know what was in my head when I played it. Let's listen. It's funny when you listen to it with the music. Mostly, it's fine. Honestly, it's acceptable. You could probably send it off to mix and have no issues with it. But since I'm in here, I'm probably going to make some adjustments. Let's listen to it again. It sounds fine, but once I take the guitars out, I notice things are off a little bit. So if I clean this up a little bit, bring this bass drum to where it's supposed to be. The snare drum is off the tiniest bit. Oops. Did that move? Let's fix this. All right. So beat 2. So 82 beat 1 to beat 2. I just cleaned up. Let's listen. I just created an artifact that I do not like. You'll hear it. It's that first snare beat, something went off. Hear it? You heard it. Something gave out. And I wonder if it has anything to do with the hi-hats maybe no longer lining up because I moved things. Let's move the hi-hat over, see if that tightens it up. Yep. Of course, as you make adjustments, you start hearing other things, but things are pretty tight now in that. And of course, sadly, I'm going beat by beat at the moment. That bass drum's at a good enough spot. That snare drum's off just a smidge. It's really the snare drums and the bass drums that I'm paying most attention to. Bass drums are pretty good. The snare drum's off right here, just enough that I think I might want to do something about it. And that may throw the hi-hats off a little bit. So let's listen to measure 82, beat 2. Yeah, good. So we work our way over to 3, bass drums on, nice. Snare, nice. Snare, nice. Final bass drum, nice. I think we can call measure 82 good enough. Let's listen. I like it. All right, let's do a couple more measures before we wrap up today. So thanks for joining. Today we are editing some drums in Logic Pro. This is an upcoming song for the band Octavate, which you can find at octavate.band, www.octavate.band, or on all the socials at Octavate Band. Octavate just released a song this week called Better Never Than Late. You can find it on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, all the places. It's got a little bit of a Tool vibe to it. So get out there, go listen to Better Never Than Late from Octavate, or some of the earlier songs, My Wasteland and Slithering, are out there as well. And you're hearing a little bit of what will become a song called Wearing Thin. You may have heard some early recordings of it. We're working on the finished track for Wearing Thin today. So I'm editing some drums, just getting things ready for production. So I'm in the pre-production stage. I'm gonna get a couple more measures done before I go off and have some breakfast. So let's listen to the loop of measures 82 and 83. This will be the first time we've listened to measure 83. So let's go. Oh yeah, there's some things in there we'll need to work on. Let's turn the music off so we can hear just the drums and the metronome. So it's got some real feel in it. The downside of the feel is Josh already has the guitars recorded. So the problem is the feel has been set by the guitars. And as I'm getting to the end of this measure, I'm playing a style which is very common for me, which is a little bit of a drag. I often play behind the beat. It's just my personal style. It doesn't mean I lose the tempo. I actually keep the tempo, but I often slow down in certain measures for uh, to accent things. The downside is if someone else has already set the tempo, like the song has been set, things just sound a little bit off. So measure, go away. I'm trying not to get this to show up on my screen. There we go. Okay, so measure 83. Snare drum gets off a little bit here. I'm going to tighten it up just a little bit. I'm going to tighten up this bass drum just a little bit here. These are actually pretty good. Just off just a hair. Honestly, I could leave it. But if I want to make it as tight as possible, even pull this bass drum for the next measure in. Let's give this thing a listen. We're paying attention to measure 83. We're looping measures 82 and 83, but really paying attention to 83 right now. I just pulled in some snare and some bass drums, and let's see how that sounds. Ooh, that changed the feel in a way that I did not like. So, yeah, Josh, I know. I mean, I like that we're sticking with the metronome on this. But I just moved things to align with the click, and it threw the feel off in a way that I do not like. I am fixing this right now. So I'm going to take out that bass drum change I made. I'm going to take out that snare drum change I made, and I'm going to play, see how we sound. Okay, I didn't like that either. I'm going to take out the change before, which is the snare drum change here. Let's listen to this. Music's off, just the drums are going, which sounds okay, but I am playing a pattern here that doesn't really go well with the music. I'm not going to do an edit here. I'm going to have to do this later, but I am going to need to change the way that measure 83 ends. It just does not go well with the guitars, so I might need to make a change here. I'm going to come back to that later. It's not something I want to deal with right now. So I should make a note of that. Can I make a note in here? Yeah, let's make a note. Here we go. You should revisit measure 83. And right. Note to self, done. Notes off the screen. Let's listen to it one more time. Make sure I didn't make any edits by mistake as I brought that window up. All right, we're out of here. We'll come back to measure 83 later. All right, I'm going to do one more and then we'll log off. We've been hanging out for an hour this morning. This has been great. Thank you for hanging out. Hope everyone's having a great Wednesday. We're going to make some adjustments on measure 84. I'm going to pretend 83 doesn't exist, but I got to get this. I'm going to start 84 off tight. I'm going to hit that bass drum and crash right at the beginning there. Oh, 83 is driving me crazy. Oh, this is going to drive me so crazy. All right, I'm going to make this last adjustment here. I can't walk away from it. I want to. All right, so measure 84 actually sounds pretty good. As it's looping, it sounds pretty good. Well, the snare drum's off quite a bit too, but it sounded pretty solid. I've got some pieces that are, oh wow, it's off considerably. Let's listen to it again. It sounded good in my ears though. Oh yeah, I hear the drag right after the crash. Makes sense. I'm coming off a crash, getting myself back into position. but my timing, it's interesting, takes, what is it, 3 beats before it gets back on track. By beat 3, it's starting to get back on track. Let's see, by beat 4, do we get there? Yeah, we do. That's interesting. All right. Oh, I moved. All right, let's try this again. Well, we've gone this far. Might as well tighten everything up because now you can hear. Now that I've messed with it, you can actually hear the hi-hats are off. Before, it just had a little bit of a human drag to it. Now it sounds like I made some mistakes. So let's listen to 84. I just chopped it up quite a bit. Yeah, 84 feels pretty tight, sounds pretty good. So let's bring this thing back to the beginning. Let's listen to it from the top. Just music, the original music recording with drums over it. Here is an early listen to the instrumental of Wearing Thin, a future Octavate song that Josh and I have been working on since. I'll turn the metronome off so you don't have to hear the click. Hey Josh, since you're there, if you get a chance, will you send me a copy of this without your drum mix in it? That way, as I'm doing these drum edits, I can not listen to your drum track. I've been meaning to ask you that, and I keep forgetting to. Since you're there, if you ever get a chance, and you want to mix a copy Wearing Thin without your drum track, next time I do editing here, I'll leave it out. we are about to edit. We're about to enter unedited territory here. Here's the spots where we have not made any edits yet. So if you hear things that sound a little off, they are very natural. All right, here we come to the end. Well, thanks for hanging out with me today as I made some edits to the upcoming Octavate song, Wearing Thin. Appreciate you hanging out, joining the stream this morning. Be sure to go out to your favorite music service and check out the new Octavate song, Better Never Than Late. Just came out this week. We are really excited about it. We've got a few songs out there, and would love it if you check out the new song we have out there. So thanks so much for joining the stream today. I generally do this every Wednesday. I'll come on here and do some music editing. Other days of the week, I will do some performing, some either singing, drumming, guitar playing, whatever the case may be. But every Wednesday morning, I'll usually come on here and do some engineering work, and you can join along, bring questions, comments, distract me, whatever the case may be. But thanks for hanging out. Hope you have a great Wednesday, a great New Year's, and we will see you in 2021. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.